Okay, so let me make sure I got this. So Conrad,
Yes.
Phil, Liz, Frito, Jason, Bob, Rabbit, C, Hannah, Petra, Lindsay, Mike, and Troy.
Yep.
Right? Okay. Thank you. That's it. Okay. So, obviously there's a lot of coaching experience in this room. So, where I want to start is find out, instead of kind of telling you guys what I think, I want to find out from you what you think makes a good coach. So my guess is, how many of you have coached before? Everybody. How many of you have been coached? Okay. So you have experience on both sides of that, and I'm sure at some point in your experience you have been with a coach and you said, this person's really good. Like, I want to win for this person. I really like this person. And at some point you've also probably had a coach that you just didn't connect with and you weren't motivated by. And what I want to know is, let's start deciding what the qualities of a good coach are. So I'm looking for short phrases, adjectives of what you think are the qualities, personality traits of a good coach. Can somebody do me a favor? Can somebody scribe? I injured my elbow a couple days ago and it's not, just realized it's not working. Okay, yeah. Good communicator. Okay. Motivating. Try not to go too fast. Consistent.
Challenging.
Sorry, what did you say, Phil? Challenging? Somebody who challenges you, not somebody who is challenging. Right. Okay.
Maybe like the ability to adapt.
Adaptable?
Adapt, there you go.
Experienced. Knowledgeable.
Knowledgeable in the subject matter that they're coaching. Yeah, knowledgeable. Calm? I wasn't going to say it, but
Passionate?
passionate. Calm and passionate.
No, you couldn't.
It's a good, yeah.
Silent passion.
Patient.
Patient. Driven. Troy, you got one?
Focused, I guess. Focused on
Focused.
goal-oriented.
Yep. Mike?
Empathetic.
Empathetic. Hannah, you got one for us?
Team-oriented or person-oriented?
Liz? It's okay if you're out. That's okay.
Yeah.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
How about Conrad? You got one?
I don't know how to describe this, but someone who sticks with the team even when things aren't going well.
Loyal?
Loyal.
Dedicated? Loyal? I'll take a couple more.
Fun.
Fun? What? Okay, that's a good start. Obviously, we could probably stay here for half an hour and keep coming up with good ones. So this is a great list. And what I want to do is, actually, before I start telling you what I think makes a good coach, I want to play a little bit of a game, sort of as a demonstration. I think you've probably done this with me before. So what I want everybody to do is just put your pencils and notebooks down and stand up for a second. And if we could, I'm wondering if those who are sort of on the periphery could just come into the middle. And what I'm going to do is we're going to play a little game for a few minutes. So good, because it'll get everybody moving too. Okay. So I'm gonna read the rules of the game, and this is probably a game you've played before, but this one will feel a little bit different than the last time you played it probably. Okay. So please pay attention. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read the rules, and then I'll give you a few minutes to ask questions, and then we'll start the game. Okay. We are about to play a game called Simon Says. For the purpose of this game, I'll be the leader, and you'll be the participants. Once the game has begun, I will begin to give you instructions and ask you questions. If I precede an instruction with the word Simon Says, I want you to follow the instruction to the best of your ability. If I proceed a question with the word Simon Says, I want you to answer the question to the best of your ability, either out loud or by raising your hand. Any instructions or questions that are not preceded by Simon Says should be ignored, and you should do nothing and say nothing. If you do or say something when you are not supposed to, I want you to give yourself a point, just 1 point. Okay, and that includes flinching. So if I say, put your hands up, and you do that, that still counts, okay? For this game, for the purpose of this game, we'll be using the honor system, so I want you to keep track of your own points. There is no elimination from the game, so at no time are you out unless you wish to be out. If you choose to remove yourself from the game in the middle, and I won't take it personally, you may just sort of step out of the playing area or sit down in your chair, and that way I'll know that you're not playing. The game will continue until I instruct you that the game is over. Special note, if Simon asks you to do something that makes you feel uncomfortable, you may skip that instruction without giving yourself a point. So if I ask you to dance around like chickens and cluck out loud, and you don't feel comfortable doing that, you don't have to do that, and you don't have to give yourself a point. I won't ask you to do that, but I just want to let you know in advance that you have the option, if something makes you uncomfortable, to not do that. Okay, so for the purpose of this game, this is hands up, this is hands down, obviously. Hands on hips, hands on head. If I say turn to the right, I want you to turn a quarter turn to your right. That's 90 degrees. Pi over 2 radians for my math nerds out there. Okay. So theoretically, if you did that 4 times, you'd wind up facing the same direction that you started. If I say turn to your left, 90 degrees, quarter turn, pi over 2 radians to your left. Okay. Last thing is something that I call clapping position. Okay, so clapping position is you put your hands as if you're about to applaud really vigorously. Okay, and you get there quickly. It's like drawing pistols. Bob, that was beautiful. Everybody watch Bob. Yeah. Okay. And a little bend in the knees kind of helps too. Okay, as if you're about to applaud vigorously. I think that's it. We'll keep it simple for the purpose of this game. So really simple instructions. That's all. Any questions before we start? Anybody have any questions? Everybody good? All right, so if there are no further questions, the game, yes, Mike?
High score wins or low score wins?
I will leave that for you to decide. We can actually talk about that afterwards. That is a good question. I think the object is to try to minimize your points, but okay. Yeah, in general, that's my thinking. Okay, all right, if nobody else, that was a great question though. If there are no other questions, then the game has officially begun. Okay, we're going to start really simple, just to make sure everybody has an idea of what we're doing here. Okay, everybody put your hands up, but not yet. Okay, that's all right. Simon says put your hands up. Okay, put your hands down. Not yet. Simon says put your hands down. Simon says put your right hand up. Put your left hand up. Simon says put your left hand up. Put both hands down. Put your right hand down. Simon says put your right hand down. And put your left hand down. Simon says put your left hand down. Okay, do me a favor. Everybody turn and face me just so I can... So remember the rules of the game. That's all right. Okay, now turn and face me. Simon says turn and face me. Okay, and also do me a favor. We're a little close together, and I want to make sure nobody knocks into each other. So just spread yourselves out a little bit. Just make some room for yourself. I'm glad you realized it. That's really good. Okay, very good. So here's how the game's going to work. Okay, I'm going to do what I call 3 basic sequences. Each basic sequence will last about 60 to 90 seconds. And we'll take a little bit of break in between. And the game will get progressively harder. So each sequence will get progressively harder. The good news is I will warn you when it's about to get harder. I will give you fair warning. I'll say it's about to get harder, just so you know it's coming. Okay? Everybody looks really nervous. Do me a favor. Everybody just shake it out a little bit. Simon says shake it out a little bit. Okay, Simon says stop shaking. That's really awful. Okay, here we go. We're going to move on to sequence number 1. These are going to be basic commands, no tricks. I just want to make sure everybody has an idea of what's happening here. Okay, here we go. Everybody put your hands up. Simon says put your hands up. Put your right hand down. Simon says turn to the right. Simon says put your right hand down. Put your left hand down. Conrad's still working on right and left. Simon says if you were born on an odd numbered day, turn to the right. Okay, and put your left hand down. Simon says put your left hand down. Simon says if you're born in an odd numbered month, turn to the right. Okay, now put both hands up. Simon says put both hands up. Simon says if you're born in an odd numbered year, turn to the right. Put your right hand down. Simon says put your right hand down. And put your left hand down. Simon says put your left hand down. FYI, those people who are facing me, I think you're completely odd, right? Did I get that right? Right. Yes. Congratulations. Okay, so Simon says put your right hand up. Simon says put your left hand up. Put your right hand down. Simon says put your right hand down. And everybody turn and face me. Simon says turn and face me. Good, you guys are quick learners. Okay, so that's the end of sequence 1. Everybody put your hands down. Not yet. Okay, now put your hands down. Not yet, that's not the magic word. Please put your hands down. Simon says put your hands down. Okay, does anybody still have 0 points? Simon says, does anybody still have 0 points? Excellent. Good job, Liz. Simon says, does anybody have 0 points? Did you put your hands up? Right? Did I say put your hands down? No? No? Okay, it's okay. Okay, now you can put your hand down. Simon says put your hand down. Okay. You guys are doing great, don't worry. Okay, everybody, Simon says deep breath. That's the end of sequence number 1. We're going to move into sequence number 2. Remember, it's going to get harder, but I'm going to warn you before it gets harder. Okay, here we go. This is a review. Everybody put your hands up. Simon says put your hands up. Put your right hand down. Simon says put your right hand down. Put your left hand down. Simon says put your left hand down. Okay, it's about to get harder. Here we go. Everybody put your hands up. Simon says put your hands down. Okay, that's all right. Process. Let's try that again. Everybody put your hands up. Simon says put your hands down. Okay, we're getting there. C's just stretching. C's like, ugh. Just stretching a little bit. Let's try that one more time. Here we go. Everybody put your hands up. Simon says put your hands down. Good. Let's try one more time. Everybody put your hands up. Simon says put your hands down. Good. That's called learning. Well done, everybody. Here we go. Let's keep it rolling. Everybody put your right hand up. Simon says put your right hand up and put your left hand up. Simon says put your left hand down. That's the same trick. That's okay. Now put your left hand up. Simon says put your left hand up. Good. Put both hands down. Simon says put both hands up. Simon says put both hands down. Simon says turn to the right. Simon says put your right hand up. Simon says put your left hand up. Simon says put your right hand down. Simon says put your left hand up. Simon says put your left hand down. Turn to the right. Simon says turn to the right. Put both hands up. Simon says put both hands down. Simon says put both hands up. Put your right hand down. Simon says put your right hand down. And put your left hand down. Simon says put your left hand up. Simon says put your left hand down. I actually turned you guys around so the people in the front could see that other people were messing up as well. Sometimes being in the front's hard, Conrad, so sometimes it's nice to be able to see that you're not the only one. Okay. All right, everybody turn to face me. Simon says turn to face me. Simon says put your hands on your hips. Simon says put your hands on your head. Simon says put your hands up. Simon says put your hands down. Put your hands on your hips. Simon says put your hands on your hips. Put your hands on your head. Simon says put your hands on your hips. Simon says put your hands on your head. It's the same trick. Put your hands up. Simon says put your hands up and hands down. Hands down. Now you can put your hands down. Please put your hands down. Simon says put your hands up. Simon says put your hands down. Simon says take a deep breath. That's the end of sequence number 2. Simon says shake it out. Okay. Anybody have less than 5 points? No. Come on, Fredo.
I was so excited.
I know you're so excited to let everybody know. Simon says, does anybody have less than 5 points? That put you over?
5 points.
Damn. Okay, put your hands down. Simon says put your hands up. Simon says put your hands down. You guys are good. That was tough. That was a tough one. Okay, we're going to go into sequence number 3 really quickly. This one we're going to add clapping position because we haven't done that one yet. Okay, so just be ready for it. Simon says deep breath. All right, here we go into sequence number 3. Let's review where we've been before. Everybody put your hands up. Simon says put your hands down. Okay, well, we're getting close. Simon says put your hands up. Simon says put your hands down. Okay, now we're going to try clapping position. Remember, the key is to get there really quickly. Okay, here we go, clapping position. Simon says clapping position. Okay, that was really slow. Everybody put your hands down. Simon says put your hands down. We'll try it again. Here we go, clapping position. Simon says clapping position. Clap once. It's okay. Clap once. Simon says clap once. Again, hands down. Simon says hands down. Simon says clapping position. Clap once. See, this is cool because you can hear it, right? You don't have to see it. Yeah. Simon says clap once. Again. Simon says hands down. Simon says clapping position. Clap once. Good, that's better. Oh, that was so close. We won't count that as a flinch because I didn't hear anything. So that was good. Okay, go. All right, go ahead and put your hands down. Simon says put your hands up. Simon says put your hands down. Simon says hands on hips. Simon says hands on hips. Simon says hands on head. Hands up. Simon says hands up and hands down. Simon says hands down. Hands on hips. Simon says put your hands on your hips. Put your hands on your head. Simon says put your hands on your hips. Simon says put your hands on your head. Simon says hands down. Simon says clapping position. Clap once. Simon says clap once. Again. Simon says clap once. Again. Good. Simon says hands down. Last thing I want you to do, Simon says pick your right hand up. Simon says, cross your right hand over the other side of your body. Simon says, pat yourself on the back for a job well done. Simon says, the game is officially over. You can go back to your seats. Okay. All right. So here's the question. Was I a good leader? Petra, you're shaking your head.
No, because I stopped trusting you.
Why is that? That's okay. Usually it takes me less time to lose people's trust, but that was pretty good. So you didn't trust me because?
So your instructions were clear. I knew when I was supposed to listen. And yet you were still deliberately tricking us, so I don't trust you.
Yes. Okay. Anybody else? Was I a good leader?
Yep.
Why is that?
You kept us engaged, you kept the pace, and challenged us progressively over time.
Okay.
And I think we got better at it.
Yes.
We failed at things, and then we learned, and we got better at the end, so over
Yes.
the course of that 15 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That was,
Okay.
I thought the progressing once we failed part was pretty good.
So what's the answer? Was I a good leader or was I not a good leader? Was Petra's
Depends
was
on your learning style.
It's going to be somewhat
What's your
subjective,
objective?
right? Every person is different in terms of what they value.
right, but I don't think it matters who you are. If I'm doing one thing and saying another or intentionally misleading you, I don't think there's any person that would call that a good style of leadership, right? And I've seen that before. I used to, I worked at a summer camp and I had, I was in a supervisory position. I had a bunch of, counselors working for me, college students. And I remember, we had a rule that when you showed up to play basketball, that you showed up with shoes on that were appropriate for playing basketball. And I remember going to the basketball court one day and one of our counselors was there with his kids and a bunch of his kids were running around in flip-flops on the basketball court. And I turned to the counselor and I said, hey, what's up with your kids? Aren't you supposed to be wearing athletic shoes? And he gets up and he starts yelling at the kids, I told you to put your athletic shoes on. And the counselor was wearing flip-flops. Okay, confusing message, right? So, was I a good leader?
No.
You say no?
Now I'm confused.
Depends on the point you're trying to make.
Exactly. Thank you, Phil. It depends on what I'm trying to accomplish. Okay? So if my goal was purely output, if my goal was to have you perform successfully, which would mean that all of you got 0 points. If that was my goal, then I was a pretty poor leader. Because I was confusing you. I wasn't doing things to enable you to be successful. But if my goal was to have you learn and improve, then maybe I was good. Hope I was good. If my job was to keep you engaged and entertained, then maybe I was good. But if my goal was strictly performance, then maybe not. Everybody know who Bill Belichick is? Sometimes I talk football, I know not everybody. So Bill Belichick, by all accounts, is one of the best football coaches ever. But on a personal level, I hear he's a really, really nasty man. I hear he once cut one of his players on Christmas. But his job is not to have people like him, and his job is not to develop players. Because his job is to win a Super Bowl. And he is willing to do whatever it takes to do that. Okay? So when we talk about what does it mean to be a good leader, I think you first have to ask yourself the question, what am I trying to accomplish here? And I talked to Hannah a couple days ago to try to find out a little bit more about this program. And really there's two ends of the spectrum. One is my goal is to win a championship. And the other is my goal is to develop players. Okay? And my assumption is, from what I've heard, was conversation that was happening out in front of the building, my hope is that your priority is to develop players. I mean, if that's wrong, then I probably don't need to continue with my talk. But that was my assumption, is that your goal is to develop players, is to keep them engaged, is to make them share your passion for the sport. Now, I think we need to go into it with an attitude that we're trying to win. I think that's sort of the agreement when we play sports, is that we're trying to win. But my goal as a leader here was, in this little game that we played, was to try to not just get you better at playing, to get you better at Simon Says. And there's an end point to that, obviously. Simon Says is not a complicated game, and if we played for 20 minutes, I would probably get to the point where I wouldn't be able to, you wouldn't get any points anymore. Ultimate is a lot more complex, and some of us have played a lifetime, and we know that we still haven't, mastered the game. And so, to me, this idea of developing people, developing players, is extremely critical. And I think if you do that well, the championships will eventually come, as opposed to having your focus be on winning all the time. Okay, so so how do we do that? I mean, that's sort of, how do we effectively develop players? And so, even though we just played a game for probably about like 7 or 8 minutes, there was a lot in there that we can talk about. And I think there are 3 really critical pieces to this puzzle. One, I think you have to set the level of challenge in the right place. Okay, so for the purpose of that game, and as some of you had noticed, as the game went on, it progressively got harder. And part of the reason is because if I kept it at the same level that we had at the very beginning, eventually it would have gotten pretty boring. If all I'd been doing is say, Simon says, put your right hand up, Simon says, put your left hand up, Simon says, put your right hand down, Simon says, put your left hand down. If the level of challenge is not high enough, eventually people are going to get bored and check out. If the level of challenge is too high, people are going to get frustrated and check out. So if I had started the game immediately throwing all the tricks in the book at you, it might have been really frustrated and your brain just would have shut down. So the trick is, if the level of ability is here, to set the level of challenge right about here. I think that's what keeps people engaged. This idea that, oh, I'm so close to getting this. And then you experience success for a little while, and then it gets a little bit harder. And the idea is that even within that game, I was trying to, as you were getting better, I was trying to move the level of challenge. Okay? I think that's part of what keeps people engaged and excited about coming to practice, right? If you get to this, the sense that you're just, you got this nailed, it's going to be boring. And if you get the sense that you are so far away, then you're going to check out, mentally. You're just going to get really frustrated and not want to participate, okay? 2, so set the level of challenge in the right place. And that doesn't mean it's going to stay in one place. You're going to have to keep moving it. 2 is provide an opportunity for repetition, because repetition is really important. If you're doing things that you've never done before, you don't have a lot of experience doing, you're probably going to mess up a couple times, okay? And so there was a piece in that game where, when I said it's going to get harder, where I did this 4 times. Put your hands up. Simon says put your hands down, okay? But notice I kept doing it until everybody got it, because I want everybody to experience a little bit of success, okay? It won't come that easily on your team sometimes, and part of the challenge is your players will advance at different levels. And so you might not be able to continue to do drills until every single one of them gets it all the time, but my recommendation is to err on the side of more repetition. A lot of times I think we do drills, and especially ones where like the whole team is involved, and so you're doing something and then you're waiting for a bunch of time, and then you're doing something and then you're waiting. I would almost prefer structure where you split them up into smaller groups where they get more opportunities to throw, more opportunities to do stuff. Okay? Sometimes in those bigger drills, if you could run for 15 minutes, and because they're so complicated, each person has only had maybe 3 or 4 opportunities to make a specific type of throw. That might not be enough for everybody. And I would encourage you, instead of saying, well, it's been 15 minutes and I thought this drill was only going to run for 15 minutes, try to get a sense of whether or not you think people are getting it. Because if you abort a drill and not everybody has gotten it yet, they're just going to leave feeling frustrated, and then their minds are going to be like, I don't have that yet. So be flexible in terms of like, you know what, I was only going to do 15 minutes, but let's keep going. It looks like we need a little more work on this. And 3rd piece, which I think is the most critical piece, is if you set the level of challenge in the right place and you offer opportunities for repetition, the most important thing you need to do, and this is easy to say and not easy to do, is to create an environment where people are okay with failing. Because they will. If you've done the first 2 things properly, people are going to fail. And you have to create an environment where that's okay. I tried to do that here. And I appreciate that some people said, yeah, you were a good leader because you kept it fun. You guys were messing up, but you were laughing at yourselves, and it didn't make you want to quit. And it's sort of because of the tone that I tried to set when we were playing the game. For many of you who have played Simon Says before probably have these memories of like, oh my God, I mess up and I'm out. Which, first of all, doesn't give you the opportunity for repetition, but also it creates this air of like fear in the game, and that's not what I wanted. I wanted people to be having fun. I want people to be laughing at other people. I want people to be laughing at themselves. Because after a while, you kind of get a sense that, no, I don't want to mess up, but if I do, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. And I think that is the most critical piece in this creating this environment of learning, for lack of a better word. And it's going to happen the very first time somebody messes up at practice. Everybody's going to kind of be looking to you and saying, all right, how is this person going to handle this? Am I going to get berated? Am I going to get, somebody going to point me out and shame me? Or is it going to be like, it's all right, do it again, no big deal? And as soon as they get a sense that that's the kind of environment that they're operating in, they'll be free to learn and grow a lot faster than if they were afraid. If they're afraid, all they're going to do is throw dumps. And that's not what you want. You want to bring out whatever is in these kids. But the only way you're going to be able to do that is if they feel like they have license to try and fail. Okay. So that's easy to say, but really hard to do. And so, these are all great, and I think these are all dead on. But there's one characteristic I find probably above all that I think makes for a quality coach. And I have coached a lot of athletes, and I've coached a lot of coaches. And when I coach the coaches, I talk to them about one thing, and thank you, Mike. I think this nails it. To me, empathy is probably the best quality that a coach can have. And it's sort of, in a way, it encompasses a lot of this stuff. Because if you have empathy, you probably have a lot of these other things too. So empathy to me is, you can look it up on Wikipedia. The way I defined it is your athletes get a sense that you see them as individuals. They get a sense that you know what they are going through, and they feel that you care about them. And I think more than anything else, that will help create that environment of, it's okay for me to fail. It's okay for me to try and fail. So how do we do that? How do we be empathetic? How do we create empathy? And I'm going to sort of go through a list of things that I feel like, and they're all going to seem like small, trivial things, but I think make a difference when your athletes show up to work with you. First of all, learn their names. I know that sounds really trivial, but I think it makes a difference. And there are ways that you can do that. So you notice that I kind of, in my head, went through, you're Candace, right? Yes. Okay, yeah. So I didn't even meet Candace, but I know that's Candace, okay? So I came up with this little trick for myself. And sometimes I would have groups, I'd be coaching groups of 25, 30 people. And usually, either at the first week or the second week I met with them, I had all their names down. And it makes a difference when somebody shows up and you say, hey Candace, good to see you again. Hey Lindsay, how was your week? It just makes people feel like I am noticed, I'm not just a number, okay? And so here's how I do that. So I try to explain this a lot, and I always get it wrong, but when you meet somebody for the first time, hi, so-and-so, shake hands. I forget names like 75% of the time. If you ask me 5 seconds later, I will have forgotten. And then what I have to do is I have to go through the list of all the possible names in my head and try to pair it with that person. Was that Catherine? Was it Rachel? Was it Susie? And that's almost impossible. However, what I find is if you learn the names first before you meet the people, when they show up, it just seems easier to pair the faces with the names than the other way around. So as opposed to knowing the faces and trying to guess the names, you already know the names and you're trying to guess which person is which. So before I came here, I looked at the email list and I looked at the addresses and I got all the names in my head. Ethan, Wes, Phil, Justin, Hannah, Lindsay. And so when people showed up, I had a much smaller list in my head to choose from. And also, I was looking at my clipboard when I was standing out front. And so when this guy walked up, and I was like, so that's probably either Troy or Mike. And when I heard somebody say, hey, Troy, it was locked in because I already had the names in my head, okay? So that is not, a lot of people will say, well, that's disingenuous because you wrote it all down. I don't think that's disingenuous at all. That's trying, right? And so what I would recommend is when you get your rosters, is to just go through the names and get familiar with them in your head. And what you'll find is when the people show up and you meet them for the first time, you will make that connection. And then it's really hard to lose that, okay? The only problems I had was his email address was Frito-Lay, right? And I think you're Space JB, right? So I didn't have those names, but I had most of them, even before I showed up here today, okay? So it's just a little thing, but I think it makes a difference for people when you use their names. Okay, so learn their names and use their names. And it doesn't even have to be in-depth conversation. They show up for practice, you see them get out of the car, hey Steve, how's it going? Good to see you again. Okay? People feel like, oh, the coach knows me and cares about me, or at least took the trouble to say hello. Okay? Really small thing, but I think it makes a big difference. Okay, learn their names, use their names. 2, find out about them. Ask them questions about themselves. Find out what makes them tick, find out what their lives are like. A lot of times you will find out stuff that is actually really, really important for you as a coach. Hey, how's it going? Oh, I'm just really tired. Well, what's up, Mike? How's it going? Oh, I got a big math test tomorrow, and I'm just really stressed out about it. That's an important thing for you as a coach to know, what's going on in their lives. And then next week, when Mike shows up, hey, how'd the test go? Awesome, I aced it. That real little bit of conversation sends a message that you paid attention and that you care. And that makes a huge difference for people. If you want to talk about loyalty to a coach, I think that there's something about making a personal connection. I had an athlete who, so we were out doing a run one night, and he just looked like the weight of the world was on him. And I was like, Kevin, what's up? It's like, I'm really stressed because my washer broke down, and the repairman came and he told me it was going to cost $200 to repair, and so we went to Lowe's, and it's like $800 for a new washer. And I'm like really stressed, and all my clothes are dirty, and he just went on for about 10 minutes, and I was like, man, I'm really sorry. I know what that's like when your appliances fail on you. And then next week he showed up, and I said, hey, how's your washer? He's like, oh, we got it totally fixed. I got a beautiful new washer. My clothes are all clean. That silly little bit of conversation, I think, makes a difference to people. Is you're not just treating them like the only thing that matters to you is you're a piece of meat as an athlete. Like, I see you as a person, and I know you have a life outside of this stuff, and it matters to me. It's not just being a good coach, it's just being a good person, I think. What's that? What's that?
So you can't give them nicknames if you don't know.
Yeah, that's true. So try to remember. So if try to remember the things that they tell you. And again, if you have 30 athletes, sometimes it's really hard. And so what I do is I would carry either sometimes I have a clipboard, sometimes I just have on index cards. Is if somebody tells me something, I'll make a note. Kevin, broken washer, right? Stick it in my pocket. And then next week when I show up to the workout, when Kevin gets out of his car, I kind of go, oh, that's right, his washer was broken. Okay. Actually, I didn't have to pull out for that because I remembered that. But again, some people say, well, that's really, some people might say that's disingenuous, and I don't think so at all. It's practical. When you have 30 people, you're not always going to remember everything that somebody tells you, but I think making an effort to write it down so that when people show up, you have a little reference like, oh, that's right, I talked to so-and-so about this last week. One of the advantages was our athletes would enter their workouts on an online application, and I could track their workouts. And so if I saw somebody in the comments section said, this was my worst run ever, I would write that down, worst run ever. And then when we showed up to meet together, I would say, what was up with your run last week? And so it's just like somebody saying, oh, you're actually paying attention. And I think that makes a difference. You will have your rosters, you'll have your notes. I recommend having just a clipboard with a list of all your athletes on it, just their names. And if something happens during practice, just take notes. If somebody says something to you that you want to remember, just take notes, write it down so that you'll have it. And then on your clipboard, you can actually go, oh, last week somebody told me this, and I want to make sure I follow up on that. Because sometimes things are spinning so fast at practice, you could go into it saying, I meant to talk to somebody about this, but I forgot. If you have it right here during a quiet moment in practice where everybody's doing a lap or something, you can just kind of go, oh, that's right, I need to talk to so-and-so about this. Okay. During practice, ask questions. When I train new coaches, almost always they'll come up to me and say, I'm really, really nervous about tonight because I feel like I don't know enough, or I don't know what directions to give them. And everybody thinks that, like, if we're out running, like as a coach, your job is to watch somebody's running form and make comments on that. Oh, I noticed your cadence is a little bit low, or I noticed you're kicking your heel out a little bit at the end of your stride. And I always tell people, don't worry about any of that stuff. The knowledge piece, which I think is important, I think Bob said knowledge, somebody said knowledgeable. I think it's important to have knowledge on the subject. I have no doubt that you all have knowledge on the subject that you're coaching. And for me, that's not the most important part. The trap you get into is if I see somebody running and I feel like, oh, I'm the coach, I'm supposed to say something to this person. And I go up and I say, so I noticed your cadence is a little off, maybe you just want to pick up your turnover a little bit. That might be the right advice, but if that person is not in the right place to hear it, it's not going to make a difference. So what you need to do, even before dispensing any advice whatsoever, is to find out where that person is at. And so I'll go up to that person and say, hey, Cindy, how you feeling tonight? I'm just, I got new orthotics in my shoes and they're really killing me. Okay, at that point, it doesn't make sense for me to give her any advice about her cadence because she's not going to hear it. She's somewhere else. She's worried about her footwear. I can talk to her about orthotics. I can ask her where she got them. I can ask them if they're custom. I can recommend places to go to get them. Or I can just say, you know what, I've been there. I know what it's like when your feet hurt. And just try to get through this one, and we'll reset on next one. We'll talk a little bit more about your footwear, okay? It wouldn't have made any sense whatsoever for me to talk to her about our cadence. So what I recommend is the very first thing you need to do, even if you're tempted to give advice, just step back for a second and say, let me ask a question first. Okay, somebody's coming off the field and they're hanging their head. Hey, how's practice going? Frito, how's practice going? I'm just not feeling it today. Or, C, how's practice going? I'm too stressed about my math test, right? So once you find that out, then you can decide whether or not the feedback you're about to give is worthwhile, or you can take a completely different tack. You might actually be able to help them with whatever difficulties they're in, but you can't help them if you don't know what difficulties they're in. So ask a lot of questions. It's one of my favorite things to do as a coach. And you'll be surprised. You can ask a really, really small general question, and somebody all of a sudden who may have been quiet for weeks and weeks will just unload a whole bunch of stuff on you. And it's really, really important stuff. Some of the quietest people are holding back some stuff, and they would never, ever tell you in a public setting. They might tell you one-on-one, but they won't until they trust you, which might take 4, 5, 6 weeks. And then they show up one day and you say, hey, how you feeling today? My parents are getting divorced, and it's been happening for a while, and I just can't deal with this and the stress of potentially getting cut from this team. And that is all really, really important stuff for you to know as a coach. But you'll never know if you don't give them the opportunity to say that, and the way you give them the opportunity is to earn their trust and keep asking questions. Okay? I would say that I ask more questions than I dispense advice as a coach, because it's the best way to find out where your athletes are. Okay. Pat them on the back at the end of practice. I sort of make a practice of doing this at the end of all of our runs or our mountain bike workouts. If I'm riding next to somebody, I'm just like, Troy, thanks for showing up today. That was a really hard workout. I'm really glad you were here. It makes a huge difference. And I try to do that with as many different people as possible. And I train my coaches, the coaches that I hire, to do that as well. If you can't get close to a pat on the back, that's okay. But just a verbal pat on the back. And if I can't do it with the individuals, I try to do it with the whole group. Hey, everybody, that was one of the hardest workouts we'll do all season. And I know that a lot of you are struggling with that, and don't be frustrated, because that was really hard. It was intended to be hard, and give yourself credit for showing up tonight and making it through. And everybody gets in their cars and they feel great about themselves. That's what I want. I want them to leave feeling energized and excited, not dejected and mopey about something that happened. Try to put a big bow on it at the end of practice, or at the end of our training workouts. Create opportunities for repetition. I think we had talked a little bit about that, but not just repetition, also create opportunities for success. Okay? There's a tendency to think we got to keep driving harder and harder and harder. Like every once in a while, take a step back, do a drill that you've done before and everybody's really good at. Get the energy up, especially if things seem to be lagging. Create opportunities for success where people feel good about themselves and you can actually bring the energy back. Sometimes there's some practices that are just really, really hard. You're introducing new concepts, especially if there's a lot of standing around, teaching zone defense, teaching zone offense. There's a lot of frustration and standing around and talking. Follow that up with a drill that everybody's real good at, the one that they like doing, and one that they all feel like they can experience some success. Especially at the end of a practice. Try not to leave on a standing around intellectual discussion. Try to end on something that's going to leave everybody up and excited to come back for the next one. Share your experiences, both positive and negative. And in some ways, I think the negative sharing is even more helpful. Somebody drops a disc in the end zone, and they come off the field, and they're really upset with themselves. And I'm like, why are you hanging your head? Well, I dropped a disc in the end zone. And I'd be like, okay, so Mars 1982 semifinals, I dropped a disc in the end zone. It was like a 4-foot pass. At Universe Point, we lost the game, FYI. And then the person goes, oh, okay. So let them know that you're human. Let them know that you've been through the ringer yourself. You've all played Ultimate long enough that you've all had great experiences and you've all had ones that maybe are not so good. And I think sharing that with your athletes makes you more human and more approachable. Instead of this, we tend to think, well, we're coaches, we're trying to keep ourselves as gods on a pillar or something. In some ways, I think bringing yourself down to the level that they're at, and more importantly, letting them know that you know what they are going through, that the awful feeling that they have right now is one that you have had as well, and you can help them identify with that. So when I was coaching running, I would run a bunch of half marathons with our group. That was sort of our target distance. And I showed up in Philadelphia for a half marathon completely unprepared one day, but for some reason thought because it said coach on my jersey that I could just, fake my way through it. And I suffered big time. And it was one of my worst races ever. So I had a habit of, after my races were over, I would write a little race report and send it out to my athletes, just talking about my strategy and what I did well and what I'd like to improve next time, whatever. And I almost didn't write a report for that race because it went so poorly. And the director of our training club said to me, it's like, you should write it. I told him how I had such a bad experience. He said, you should write about that. And I said, all right, I'll write about it, just more for purging it from me. And I wrote this awful tale of poor pacing and poor nutrition, and I wound up at the end walking 13-minute miles and getting passed by a lot of our athletes and being really ashamed of I'm supposed to be this great coach and I had messed up. I almost didn't take my medal at the end. They were giving medals out to everybody because I was so embarrassed, and I actually did take it home with me. And so I wrote this really long, horrible tale, and he put it on the blog, which I didn't really give him permission to do. And I got more comments about that story than any other one I had ever written. And I still to this day, it was called Red Flags in Philly, and I still to this day have people come up to me and talk to me about that, but not in a mocking way. And what I think happened was everybody came up and said, oh my God, I've done the same thing. Oh, thank you so much for writing that, because I made those same mistakes before, and it was so great to hear that you make them too. I mean, it was a good lesson for me that here, by opening myself up, not intentionally, but I got opened up, that sharing that story was more important than all the other stories of success that I had shared with people. I think it humanized me and made other people feel like, oh, he's going through the same struggles that I am. Just because he's a coach or just because he does this doesn't mean he doesn't understand what I'm going through as well. So don't be afraid to share your experiences. Even though it may dredge up some bad memories for you of times when you weren't exactly at the peak of your performance, I think sharing that stuff is important for your athletes. Treat them all equally. Both my parents were public school teachers, and I learned a lot from them. And my mom once said to me that the hardest thing that she had to do in her classrooms was treat all the kids the same. Because she said, you will have favorites. You're going to have athletes, 20, 25 kids. You are immediately going to love some of them. And you're immediately not going to like some others. That's just the way it is. The odds are pretty good that there's going to be some you connect with really well and some that you just don't have a good feel for. And the trick is that if I were to be observing you from the outside, I wouldn't be able to tell. I wouldn't be able to tell which kids were your favorites, and I wouldn't be able to tell which ones you didn't like, because you treat them all equally. It's a really, really hard thing to do. And it's just going to be, you're going to have to get yourself to see somebody, and the kids who you like are going to get out of the car and you're going to be like, yeah, good to see you again. Is if you do that to one kid, you have to do it for all of them. They can't know. I'm not saying you can't have favorites, because that would be unreasonable to expect. But what I am saying is that they can't know that you have favorites, and they can't know who they are. You have to treat them all the same. Don't bullshit. And I say this because I've done it and it's got me in trouble. Because sometimes, people will show up to workouts and I'll kind of have that, oh, I'm the damn coach. And so they'll ask me questions and I'll be able to field all of them. And then somebody will say, I'll be like, hey, I got this. And then somebody will say, so I heard that doing the faster runs isn't as good for mitochondrial development as some of the slower runs. And I'll say, well, no, it's not really mitochondria, it's more about your capillaries. And they'll say, well, aren't they the same thing? I'll be like, well, yes and no. And now I'm totally bullshitting because I don't know. I just immediately started answering the question because I thought that I was the coach and I'm supposed to answer the question. And they know. If you're bullshitting, they know. They have a good sense of that. And there's no better way to lose credibility than start talking about something you don't know the answer to. So the best thing you can do is if somebody asks you a question, even if you're not completely sure, is you do this. That's a great question. And I'm not completely sure what the answer is, but I will find out the answer for you. I'll ask some of my other coach friends and I will get back to you next week on that. And what I think that does is, it says, I'm human, and I think people respect that. I think people respect if you say, you know what, I don't know. But if you do say that, make sure you do it. Okay, if somebody asks you a question you don't know, and you say, I will find out for you, then find out, and then come back next week and say, so you were right, mitochondria, capillaries, the mitochondria are sort of the little filaments in the and I'm not a doctor, so little filaments in the capillaries, but you were absolutely right, and it turns out that the slower runs are better for development of the, I go home, I do some research online, I ask some of my coach friends, and I come back with an answer. But don't get yourself into a situation where you start talking and you hope that you can bullshit them, because most of the time you can't. It's just not a good thing to do. Share your love and passion for the sport. I don't think that's too hard to do, but somebody put the word fun up here, and I think that's sort of a key piece of it. Is that, in a way, this is pretty serious, because we're trying to develop players, and we're trying to win championships ostensibly. But if we lose the fun factor, then eventually people are going to burn out. And so do what you can to keep it fun and keep it interesting. I try to do that when we're playing Simon Says, just to have fun with you guys. And I think what that does is it also keeps things a little bit lighter, and people put a little bit of pressure on themselves if they know that part of this is actually going to be fun. If you have a certain silly drill or something that you can do, which just kind of, when you sense people are being tense, just to throw it in there to make people look silly or laugh at themselves, I think that helps. And I think it's important that we don't take ourselves too seriously as coaches either. And I guess I wrote down here a question, and it says, how will you react when they fail? So there are cuts that are going to happen. Is that right? My understanding? So there's already going to be a lot of pressure on these guys when they show up. Even if you don't ever say the word cut, it's in the back of their mind. And they know that it's there. And I think you're catching athletes at a very, very important and developmental time in their athletic careers. So they're not just trying to figure out what kind of players they want to be, they're trying to figure out what kind of people they want to be. And I think that there's already enough pressure on them as it is. So these kids might have some skills, but they're buried. And the only way you're going to find them is if you allow them to try, okay? So you got somebody, gets the disc, they see somebody like 40 yards downfield, and they try a big looping forehand, and it goes way out of bounds. And they don't get the sense, if they look over at you and you're kind of frowning and scribbling on your clipboard, they're going to get a sense that, okay, that wasn't okay. Even though if you gave them 10 more chances, that might be a throw that they own and you want them to throw. If they have the least bit of fear that whatever it is they're doing is going to somehow result in them getting cut, then all they're going to do is throw dumps. They're going to go like this and go, no, I don't want to get cut, and they'll throw a dump. But then what happens is they don't get a chance to develop. They have to be able to take risks. And so the way that you react when they fail, I think, is critical. Okay, somebody makes that throw, goes way out of bounds. They come off the field, you go up to them and say, so I'm okay with the throw, Troy. You'll get that. The one thing I would like you to think about is after you made that turnover, you sat and you hung your head for about 3 seconds. What I'd like you to do is next time you do that, just get right in on defense and get it back, okay? That is a good way of saying that I'm not worried about the turnover, I'm just worried about your effort. Just keep plugging away, just keep trying. And how you react when they fail is extremely critical. They might even look over at you because they're worried. So, and if you just go, it's cool, just keep playing. I think that goes a long way. Oh, I can try that again. Or you can even say that to them. Hey, that throw, try it again. That person was open, that was the right throw. If they were quadruple covered and there were 3 other people open underneath, maybe the feedback could be a little bit different, but that's not about the throw itself. That's more about hey, if they're open, do it. If it goes out of bounds, that's okay, you'll get that eventually. But if they're covered, just look underneath a little bit. If you look and you see a lot of defenders there, maybe pick one that's more open, okay? That's a good way of framing it, I think. Okay. So if you do all this and create this empathetic environment, I think there will be several results. And this sort of how I define whether or not I'm doing a good job as a coach. 1, you'll have earned the respect of all your players, which I think is critically important. 2, they'll want to perform for you as much as they want to perform for themselves. They want to win for you. I mean, just because you have created that environment. They know that you care about them, and conversely, they care about you. And they know that this is important to you, and they want to win for you. Even the player, and this is really hard to do, but if you do it right, I think even the players that you cut will leave maybe feeling a little bit disappointed, but excited to come back and try again, and feeling like it was a positive experience and they actually learned something, which I think would be great. Because some people are going to leave earlier than they want to. But if they leave thinking, that was really good. I got to play with some great players. I got to learn a lot of stuff, and I'm going to come back next year and I'm going to get this. Like, that would be the best possible result to me, I think. They share your love and passion for the sport, and this is sort of the big picture. A lot of people think that coaching is, you know, I love coaching, and part of why I love coaching is because as an athlete, I was not born gifted. My parents were not, like, athletics is not in my DNA. My parents are not sedentary, but they weren't athletes. They didn't participate in sports. I had to really work for it. And I played Ultimate for many, many years. And I was a good player, and I felt like I played at a level a lot higher than I really should have because I worked really hard. Not everybody is going to come in as gifted athletes. Not everybody is 6'7" and can run a 4.2 40. But that doesn't devalue their experience as an athlete. One of the things I've always loved is that I have, at a more advanced age, been able to accomplish some things that have been really, really important to me. And you know, completing really, really long mountain bike races and completing really long running races is not something that I was born with. And I've had such great experiences that I want to share them with other people. My guess is that all of you are here because you have had great, Ultimate has given you a lot, and you want to give back. And you have an opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. I know that may sound like it's overstating things, but I don't think it is. And I still have people come up to me 10, 15 years later and say, you said something to me at one of the workouts that made a huge difference. And I'll ask them what it was, and I won't even remember saying it. I'll say, well, it sounds like something I might have said. But you have the opportunity, for better or worse, and also in some ways the burden as well, for influencing these kids in their athletic careers and the trajectory of their athletic careers. And along with that comes a lot of responsibility, because if you say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, these kids may bail and never play Ultimate again, which would be really unfortunate. So it's a heavy responsibility, but it's a good one to have. And I think if you go into it and when you stand in front of the group, you have this sense of like, I'm doing something really important here, because what I say and what I do could influence these kids for a really, really long time. They're going to be watching you all the time. They're going to be watching how you react to what happens when we win, what happens when we lose, what happens when I make a mistake, what happens when the other team makes a bad call. I mean, everything that happens, they're going to look to you because you are the role model, for better or worse, whether you like it or not. You're going to be the role model here. And the behavior that you model is going to have a large impact on these kids and how it is that they decide to conduct themselves and what kind of people they want to be. So when I'm working, especially with younger populations, I always have that in mind. It's like, they're watching me, and they, you know, I want them to walk away saying, I want to be like that guy. Like, not just the coach and not just the athletic part, but just as a person, I want to be like that person.